The tale begins with a group of men in white uniforms working hard to till the soil. A shout echoes through the air demanding someone to bring water. Next they lay down the straw. Several men stand in a line carrying buckets of water, while another man perched on the edge of a small cliff berates them as slaves, barking orders to speed up their efforts. Nearby, a goblin scribbles notes into a log carried by one of the men. Meanwhile, one man cannot escape the agony of the relentless lashes tearing into his shoulders, nor the mixture of blood and sweat saturating his body. He grumbles about the excruciatingly harsh existence of lifelong servitude. In a completely different context, the strongest man alive had claimed the title of champion at the young age of 27 and maintained his position as the world's top fighter for 2 consecutive years. During a decisive fight, the referee declared the match over when the towel was thrown in. The victor, with an unbroken record of 23 wins and 0 losses, had secured his place as the heavyweight champion of the largest MMA league in the world. He even wrapped up his career with an undefeated title defense before retiring. That man is Choi Hyunseok, a celebrated athlete from the Republic of South Korea, and he is the central figure of this story. Not long after his retirement, fate dealt him an unexpected hand in the form of the infamous truck Kun. As you might guess, the truck collided with him, cutting his life short. Hyunseok found himself bitterly lamenting the loss of all the money he had painstakingly saved for his retirement. After all, fighting was the only thing he had ever known in life. Adding to his woes, he was a single man with no romantic experiences to his name. Even half an hour after his death, Hyunseok remained melodramatic, though his perspective slowly began to shift. He started to see the silver lining. No more grueling training sessions, no more championship matches to defend. He even took solace in his lack of family or close friends, realizing there was no one to grieve his passing. While drifting in this ethereal space, an arm appeared out of nowhere. It belonged to a stunning angel who apologized for her tardiness. She referred to Hyunseok as an SSS-class hero and introduced herself as Rachel. Her role? She was a recruiter tasked with finding individuals whose earthly lives had ended. Hyunseok, overwhelmed and confused, blushed at her appearance, particularly at her chest. He flushed even deeper when Rachel grabbed his hand. Hyunseok requested an explanation, and Rachel presented him with 2 choices. The first option was to embrace death and await reincarnation, likely as an unlucky old bachelor. The second was to be resurrected immediately as a hero destined to save a world desperately in need of him. Rachel made the second choice especially alluring, surrounding Hyunseok with visions of beautiful women. Feeling unprepared and overwhelmed, Hyunseok responded that he needed time to think, as the situation was both sudden and lacking in detail. Rachel gently pressed him, asking if he truly intended to pass up such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She painted a vivid picture of the rewards awaiting him: wealth, fame, gorgeous women, and even exclusive privileges. Yet, as Rachel continued her pitch, Hyunseok had already started tuning her out. He pondered his options. Choosing to become a hero meant fighting once more, a path he had just retired from. The alternative, peacefully awaiting reincarnation, seemed far more appealing. Rachel, noticing his lack of enthusiasm, decided to amplify her efforts. She described how, in the other world, the village chief would run to him barefoot, offering food and hospitality from the very start. Hyunseok would be warmly welcomed and would easily complete any quests given to him. Rachel went on to say that the chief might even offer his daughter, renowned as the most beautiful woman in the village, to Hyunseok. However, Hyunseok's stoic expression remained unchanged, much to Rachel's growing concern for her recruitment bonus. Switching tactics, Rachel feigned defeat, suggesting Hyunseok simply accept his fate as a lonely bachelor. This caught his attention. To seal the deal, Rachel introduced a chilling thought: there was no guarantee that his next life would even be as a human. This realization struck a chord in Hyunseok's mind. As Rachel began to leave, he grabbed her leg, announcing his decision to accept her offer. Feigning indifference, Rachel coyly asked him to repeat himself. Hyunseok tightened his grip, shouting that he would indeed take on the role of a hero. Satisfied, Rachel grinned and suggested they begin immediately. Bewildered, Hyunseok asked what she meant. A glowing magic circle appeared beneath him, signaling the start of his journey. Protesting his lack of preparation, Hyunseok realized there was no stopping what had already begun. Rachel insisted that the breathtaking world awaiting Hyunseok was already prepared for his arrival. She wished him an incredible adventure, though she couldn't help but complain about how difficult he made things, even though he ultimately agreed to go. Suddenly Rachel received a call. She picked up and reported that the prospective hero, Noam 137,421 Hyunseok, had just completed his transmigration. Meanwhile, Hyunseok drifted into unconsciousness, only to awaken to someone telling him to open his eyes. He wondered if this could be the village chief Rachel had mentioned, the one with the most beautiful daughter. The story seemed to be unfolding as expected, until an unexpected punch landed in his stomach, jolting him awake. Irritated, Hyunseok lashed out, asking if the person had a death wish, but he stopped mid-sentence. The figure before him didn't look human, it was wearing a wild boar skull adorned with horns. This strange creature was fuming, accusing Hyunseok of slacking off in the slave dormitory. Hyunseok, thoroughly confused, hesitated. Could this bizarre creature possibly be the village chief Rachel mentioned? The thought seemed absurd, it looked more like a monster he was supposed to fight. Timidly he introduced himself as a hero. The creature looked puzzled and approached him, mocking the idea of heroes being idiots nowadays. Hyunseok began to suspect something had gone terribly wrong but convinced himself that Rachel wouldn't deceive him. Was this monster his first quest? Trying to remain calm, he decided to take action in true Korean fashion. But before he could think further, the creature asked what he had just said. Without hesitation, Hyunseok kicked the creature, yelling for it to die. He briefly celebrated his successful kick, until the creature grabbed his foot. The creature smirked, asking if Hyunseok truly thought himself a hero. With a tired tone, it grumbled about how exhausting these self-proclaimed heroes were and wondered where they kept coming from. Hyunseok found himself immobilized as the creature clenched its fist and taunted him, saying he'd feel better after a good nap. The creature tossed Hyunseok into an underground prison. As Hyunseok adjusted to his dim surroundings, a loud banging sound echoed through the area. Someone outside the door screamed to open it, demanding another round with the cow-headed monster. The door creaked open to reveal an irate goblin wielding a sword. The goblin barked at the noisy prisoner, threatening to boil him into soup if he didn't shut up. Terrified, Hyunseok promised to stay quiet. After the goblin left, Hyunseok started complaining to himself about the so-called beautiful other world. He wondered where everything had gone wrong. His biggest concern? Dying a virgin in this life too. Suddenly, a voice called out to him from a small window in the cell. The person on the other side asked if he was a newcomer. Hyunseok, intrigued, asked who they were. The man introduced himself as a senior hero, about to embark on his own journey. He explained that they were currently trapped in the Demon King's army fortress, where humans were enslaved. Peeking through the window, Hyunseok was shocked to see a fellow Korean. He respectfully addressed the man as his sunbae and asked how they ended up in this dire situation. The man, amused by Hyunseok's politeness, teased him before yelling loudly to the other prisoners, asking if the self-proclaimed heroes were still alive. Voices erupted from every direction, claiming to be heroes. The room was packed with unfortunate souls who had met similarly grim fates in this world. Hyunseok, baffled, asked what was happening. The sunbae casually explained that there were at least 100 heroes who had fallen into the Demon King's fortress. He pointed out that the red cow-headed creature Hyunseok had encountered earlier was Reed Run, the head of the fortress. The goblin who had just threatened Hyunseok was Jark, a notoriously cruel prison guard. The man then revealed the truth behind their predicament. It was all because of Rachel, the so-called angel. Hyunseok's face twisted in confusion as the man cursed Rachel, referring to her as a wicked demon. The sunbae muttered bitterly, lamenting how things could have been different if not for her mistake. Hyunseok, growing hysterical, demanded clarification. Were they not supposed to start their journey in this nightmarish place? The man confirmed his suspicions. He explained that other heroes who had been captured in different locations told him about proper starting points. Heroes typically began their journeys in peaceful cities or rural villages, even without powers. Hyunseok's realization hit hard. The reason he was in this hellish situation was none other than the so-called angel Rachel. He remembered the angel's face clearly. A few days later, we find ourselves observing the 2nd Slave Squad of the 3rd Battalion within the Demon King's army. Humans were forced to work under harsh conditions, with goblins supervising them closely. The humans were even made to chant, "Let's crush the humans, let's devour the humans." Hyunseok's body shook with exhaustion as he carried an enormous log, a goblin perched lazily on top. Eventually, a bell rang, signaling the end of the day's labor. The goblin ordered them to return to their cells. Back in his prison cell, Hyunseok reflected on how the prison conditions almost seemed better in comparison. He recalled the angel's promise about special privileges for heroes. He decided to try a popular command often used in these scenarios: status window. To his surprise, it worked and his status appeared before him. As he examined his stats, he learned some basic information about his strength and abilities. Hyunseok muttered something about what he had discovered, catching the attention of the man in the neighboring cell. The man, overhearing him, was surprised to learn that Hyunseok already had stamina at level 1. Hyunseok confirmed it and mentioned his strength stat was at 28. The man, recalling Hyunseok's reputation as a former champion, was amazed. He hadn't expected Hyunseok to be so exceptional, especially with stats exceeding 30 at level 1. Hyunseok, however, dismissed the praise, pointing out that he was still just a slave. The man remained optimistic, assuring Hyunseok that someone with his potential could definitely escape and become a true hero. Hyunseok, unconvinced, feigned sleep. In reality, he was preoccupied with his low level, doubting it would help him break free. As the night deepened and the man finally fell asleep, Hyunseok quietly got up to check his status window again. He noticed 2 intriguing options: mana that could grant superhuman strength and something called hero points. Hyunseok realized that the other so-called heroes didn't seem to know about hero points, as no one had ever earned any. Suddenly, a familiar light appeared, and the angel re-emerged, flaunting her appearance. With a teasing smile and a playful pout, she greeted him with a cheerful, "Long time no see." She provocatively asked whether she should reveal some important information about hero points. Before she could finish, Hyunseok grabbed the diminutive Rachel in his hands, his expression dark with frustration. He told her bluntly that he didn't care about hero points or anything else she had to say. At that moment, his priority was giving her a piece of his mind. Moments later, Rachel found herself tied up and dangling like bait on a fishing line. Apologetically, she explained that her magic circles had malfunctioned due to an unfortunate accident involving spilled coffee during a snack break. During her explanation, soundproofing magic was activated to ensure privacy. Hyunseok questioned whether she had been punished by being assigned as his manager. Rachel clarified that her role was to be his personal fairy, a guide to assist him until he defeated the Demon King. Hyunseok made it clear that he no longer cared about being a hero. Rachel, puzzled, asked him to elaborate. He explained that he had no intention of defeating the Demon King and would prefer to live a normal life. Rachel admitted that many prospective heroes chose that path, but she emphasized his extraordinary SSS-level potential. Hyunseok argued that his potential didn't obligate him to anything. He confessed that he never felt it was his destiny in the first place. Rachel tried to protest, but Hyunseok interrupted, saying he didn't want to live a life filled with endless battles as he had in his past. Rachel was startled by his words. She had always seen him as a foolish warrior driven only by fighting in women, but now she worried about her own fate. When she received her assignment as a personal fairy, Rachel had vehemently protested. She felt it was unfair for someone of her status to endure such a humiliating role. Nevertheless, she was ordered to stay by Hyunseok's side until he defeated the Demon King, and the decision was final. A personal fairy, she was told, must actively support and share both successes and failures with their assigned warrior. Despite her protest, she was teleported directly to the demon fortress. Back in the present, Hyunseok deduced that a personal fairy was obliged to obey their warrior's commands. Using this to his advantage, he instructed Rachel to contribute to his escape plan. Reluctantly, she agreed. A sudden noise from the door made Hyunseok act quickly, grabbing Rachel to conceal her presence. Goblins were waking the prisoners for the next day's labor. Rachel grumbled that she could use her stealth abilities without his interference. Even after roll call was complete, Hyunseok noticed that Jark, the cruel goblin guard, was still lingering by his door. The Jark informed Hyunseok that Raedran had summoned him to his office. Once there, Raedran brought up an unexpected topic. Apparently, Hyunseok had been working diligently these days. Hyunseok was utterly shocked while the Jark casually lounged on his shoulders. He couldn't believe that the foul-smelling goblin had actually complimented him. Raedran admitted that initially he had thought Hyunseok was just another lunatic human, but seeing his recent efforts had changed his perspective. That was why Raedran proposed a new role for him, head slave. Hyunseok was baffled and had no idea what Raedran was implying. Raedran elaborated, explaining that the workload had significantly slowed down recently, and someone needed to step up to manage the humans. Rachel anxiously hoped Hyunseok would refuse the offer outright. She whispered furiously, pestering him to decline, even yelling that a hero should never submit to officers in the Demon King's army. Both Raedran and the Jark heard the commotion and asked what the noise was. Hyunseok quickly shouted that he'd handle everything and ensure the humans worked harder. To distract them, he exaggeratedly bowed, slamming his head on the desk with a loud thud. Raedran was delighted. He confessed that, contrary to his first impression, he was beginning to like Hyunseok. He even promised to write him a special recommendation letter to join the Demon King's army, if he continued to perform well. Hyunseok was dismissed but felt despair deep down, watching his escape plans crumble. A few days later, the humans were chanting while working. Hyunseok strutted around, smugly scolding one worker for being too slow. He mocked, "Even my grandma could run faster than that." With such an attitude, he looked perfectly suited for the Demon King's army. The system window popped up, revealing that his hidden skill, charisma, had increased. Due to his leadership experience, Hyunseok exclaimed that being the head slave was the best. The other men exchanged worried glances, convinced he had lost his sanity. They whispered about him behind his back. Rachel, however, reprimanded him, warning that this behavior could land them in serious trouble. Hyunseok dismissed her concerns, telling her to trust his plan. He added arrogantly, "A sparrow like you can't understand the strategies of a phoenix like me?" When a man collapsed to his knees, Hyunseok scolded him harshly. The system window notified him that Reed-Run's favorability towards him had increased. Hyunseok saluted dramatically and thanked Reed-Run, declaring his loyalty. Rachel exploded in frustration, reminding Hyunseok of his desire for adventure and escape. Hyunseok scratched his head, explaining sheepishly that he was simply following the system's guidance. He reasoned that obeying the system was part of being a hero. Rachel argued furiously, insisting that boosting the Demon King's army officials' favorability was absurd and completely unlike any hero quest she had ever seen. Hyunseok stood firm, claiming it was the truth, even offering to read the quest description aloud. He read, "You who have found yourself trapped in the Demon King's fortress due to an idiot's mistake?" Rachel cut him off, arguing that the language was far too informal for a system message, which should always use neutral, precise wording. Hyunseok shrugged, insisting that perhaps an SSS-level hero system worked differently. The previous night, Rachel had made a scene, accusing Hyunseok of accepting the head slave position too willingly. Hyunseok retorted that she was the crazy one, not him. Out of nowhere, a system message had appeared, addressed to Hyunseok. It stated, "You who have found yourself trapped in the Demon King's fortress due to an idiot's mistake might feel as frustrated as someone discovering an empty toilet paper roll. However, this is an opportunity. To become a true hero, you must gain the favor of the Demon King's officer, Reed-Run, and earn 100 hero points." Hyunseok had been stunned at the time but realized this was his only viable option. Now back at work, Hyunseok led the slaves in singing the Demon King's Third Army Corps song. Rachel was puzzled, realizing only high-ranking figures could alter quest objectives. She wondered why they would do such a thing for Hyunseok. Suddenly, Jark approached Hyunseok again, instructing him to follow him to Reed-Run's office. Reed-Run praised Hyunseok for the significant increase in productivity among the slaves. Hyunseok, feigning humility, attributed the improvement to Reed-Run's wise decisions. Rachel scoffed, muttering that such shallow flattery wouldn't work. But to her shock, Reed-Run seemed genuinely pleased, visibly flinching with satisfaction. The system window reappeared, announcing that Hyunseok had achieved his favorability goal and successfully completed the hero quest. He earned 100 hero points, unlocking the beginner heroes store with his first points. Both Hyunseok and Rachel were astonished that the plan worked so effectively. With the favorability quest complete and everything progressing smoothly, Hyunseok decided it was time to move on to the next phase of his strategy. He approached Reed-Run, asking permission to begin training the slaves. Reed-Run raised an eyebrow and questioned the request. Hyunseok painted an idealistic picture, a group of slaves working in perfect harmony, trained to the point of discipline mastery, each performing the labor of three without slacking. He emphasized that with such efficiency, the fortress could be fully constructed within a week. Reed-Run, however, argued that humans were physically too weak to endure training while continuing their tasks. Unfazed, Hyunseok added that if this plan succeeded, even the commander would heap praises on Reed-Run. This was enough to convince Reed-Run, who approved the training without much further thought. Back in his cell, Rachel was dramatically despairing over the situation. She lamented that her hero had completely lost his mind, not only submitting to the Demon King's army but now training slaves on their behalf. She felt utterly hopeless and dejected. Hyunseok, irritated by her theatrics, snapped at her for being so noisy. He assured her he had a plan. Skeptical, Rachel asked if he was trying to make a fool of her again. Hyunseok, quick-witted as always, retorted by asking if she thought he was her He then revealed his true intentions, using the slaves to stage a rebellion. Hyunseok explained that the fortress housed around 3,000 human slaves, while the Demon King's army station there had only about 500 soldiers. Furthermore, a base for the Human Alliance was located nearby. In the chaos of an uprising, they could request reinforcements from the Human Alliance. Hearing this, Rachel's despair transformed into admiration, her eyes sparkling as she admitted he wasn't as foolish as she had thought. Hyunseok then decided to check the rewards from the quest. Rachel, still skeptical, asked if he truly received hero points or if the whole quest was fabricated. Hyunseok reassured her, explaining that everything he had been saying was true. He even shared that the hero's store had been unlocked and decided to take a look. Hoping for something useful, Hyunseok approached the store with high expectations. This, he thought, could be his lifeline and the key to gaining a real hero skill. When the status window revealed the store's offerings, Hyunseok was shocked. The skills included Hold Your Breath, F rank, which improved breath control, and Shit-Holding, a skill to endure bowel pressure longer. Hyunseok sarcastically mused that shit-holding should have been an SSS rank skill, especially useful in public emergencies. The other skills available were mundane, cooking, cleaning, and laundry. Confused and furious, Hyunseok questioned how these were hero-appropriate skills. Rachel, laughing at his frustration, explained that the store was still at level 1. She assured him that collecting more points and leveling it up would eventually unlock better options. Still fuming, Hyunseok lashed out, telling Rachel to shut up and calling her a swindling fairy. The next day, the slaves saluted the Demon King as Hyunseok commanded them to sing the Third Army Corps song. At his signal they began. We, the great Demon King army, defeat humans, eat humans. Forget all the suffering when you catch them. Nothing under the sky compares to the Demon King's affection. Reed Run observed the performance, feeling pleased with his decision to allow Hyunseok to train the slaves. Suddenly, the door to his quarters burst open as Jark entered with urgent news. The human army was advancing toward the fortress. The 8th Division, the largest unit in the area, had already fallen into a trap and retreated. If the 8th Division had been defeated, Jark warned, it was only a matter of time before the humans reached the fortress. Despite the dire situation, Reed Run remained calm. He acknowledged Jark's suggestion to evacuate but insisted they wait a moment. He declared that since ancient times, wars were won or lost based on supply lines. The first rule of war, he stated, was never to lose a competent supply officer. With that, he instructed Jark to leave while he took care of Hyunseok before following. Meanwhile, Hyunseok scolded the slaves, asking if they were prepared to follow his orders. Hearing a commotion, he sighed, suspecting that combat training might once again be interrupted by Reed Run's constant surveillance. Checking the status window, Hyunseok noted that while his abilities had improved slightly, it wasn't enough to launch a rebellion. He muttered aloud, hoping for an unexpected event that could help him increase his power quickly. Before he could finish his thoughts, Reed Run landed abruptly beside him. Reed Run tapped Hyunseok's shoulder and called out to him, catching him off guard. Hyunseok turned, surprised by the sudden presence of Reed Run, who seemed to be in a hurry. We don't have time, Reed Run said urgently. You must come with me right now. Confused, Hyunseok asked why and where they were going, but Reed Run offered no explanation. Just then, the commander of the human army bellowed an order to attack, declaring that victory was within their grasp. Human soldiers armed with spears charged forward, successfully striking several goblins in their path. Their advance, however, was halted by a terrifying sight, the Red Nightmare Reed Run. The commander shouted for the troops to retreat and let the knights handle the enemy. Despite the order, the humans continued their charge, emboldened by their momentum. As Hyunseok watched the chaos, a thought crept into his mind. Why were human troops here? He began considering the possibility of using the situation to his advantage. Perhaps this was his chance to stab the Demon King's commander in the back end. Return to human society as a hero. One of the humans yelled, "Die, Red Nightmare," and lunged at Reed Run. With unsettling ease, Reed Run grabbed the man by the head and crushed it, leaving Hyunseok frozen in shock. Reed Run then unleashed his combat arts, performing the 7th movement. He slammed the soldier's face into the ground, following it up with an area of effect attack, the explosive destruction wave. The ground shattered, sending human soldiers flying through the air. Turning back to Hyunseok, Reed Run asked, "Are you all right?" Hyunseok saluted reflexively, replying that he was fine and subtly adding that he'd be leaving soon. This moment reminded Hyunseok that he was still in the company of one of the Demon King's most formidable warriors. The battlefield buzzed with activity as the humans claimed the area. They raised 2 flags at the center and began organizing the citizens of Mariot Kingdom and Drasan Empire. A soldier questioned Hyunseok's prison mate, asking if they were warriors. The man replied affirmatively. The warriors were separated from the other captives and led down a different path. A figure appeared to greet them, Olivane Grimier, a middle-aged man with striking red hair and a beard. He was a duke of the Dresden Empire and commander of the Allied forces. A soldier approached Olivane, reporting that the evacuation had been completed. Olivane praised the soldier for his efforts. The soldier also mentioned that those claiming to be warriors had been drafted. Olivane gave the order to begin. "All soldiers to your positions," he commanded. Moments later he gave a chilling order, "Annihilate all the warriors before us." Meanwhile, a carriage traversed the forest. Inside, Hyunseok sat in sullen silence, bidding farewell to his dreams of adventure and his imagined second life. Across from him, Reed Run sat stoically. Hyunseok couldn't help but think about how Reed Run had effortlessly dispatched everyone chasing them. Their pursuers were no longer a concern. Rachel, attempting to cheer Hyunseok up, remarked that moments of crisis often present opportunities. She suggested they head to the headquarters and properly assess the Demon King army situation. Hyunseok, unimpressed, told her to shut up. Breaking the silence, Reed Run admitted, "I must have fallen asleep for a moment." He looked at Hyunseok and asked, "Did you say something?" Hyunseok quickly covered, claiming he was just mumbling about how honored he was to accompany someone like Reed Run. Reed Run, seemingly touched, expressed his appreciation. He informed Hyunseok that they were nearing the 3rd Corps headquarters and encouraged him to look forward to it. "Once we arrive," Reed Run added, "I'll officially enlist you in the Demon King's army." Hyunseok turned pale but managed to force out, "It's an honor." Rachel too panicked silently. At the headquarters, a guard announced Reed Run's return, prompting the gates to open. Reed Run gestured for Hyunseok to follow, stating that he would take him directly to the commander. "It's an absolute honor to meet the commander so soon," Reed Run remarked, though his body language hinted otherwise. He warned Hyunseok to be on his best behavior in the commander's presence if he wanted to live. Recalling an old saying about surviving even in a tiger's den by keeping one's wits, Hyunseok steeled himself and vowed not to give up. At the commander's door, Reed Run announced himself and was granted entry. As the door opened, Hyunseok heard a woman's voice, making him wonder if the commander was human. The figure before them was striking, a woman with long ears, claw-like nails, and her eyes obscured. Her jaw and neck bore a different hue, adding to her otherworldly appearance. She lounged in her chair, wearing stilettos, exuding an aura of command. "Welcome back, Reed Run," she said with a smile. She observed that he had gained even more muscle since their last meeting. This woman was Hemis, the commander of the Demon King Army's 3rd Corps. Reed Run responded with a compliment, remarking on how her beauty had become even more radiant. Hyunseok felt his cheeks flush. He couldn't believe that such a stunning woman was a commander. Hemis smiled graciously and thanked Reed Run for his kind words. Meanwhile, Hyunseok was panicking internally, unsure of how to respond. Should he also compliment her beauty? He wrestled with the thought as Reed Run shifted the conversation. Reed Run admitted his shame for failing to defend the fortress. Hemis dismissed his guilt, explaining that the blame lay with the 8th Division commander, not him. She added with a sharp tone, "I should have already made a bag out of his hide." Hyunseok felt his breath hitch. Hemis continued, noting that the 8th Division commander had returned alive, but as a disgrace. The pressure Hyunseok felt in her presence was overwhelming, far surpassing anything he had experienced before. He clenched his fists, doing his best to conceal his trembling. Changing the subject, Hemis turned her attention to the human Reed Run had brought. Reed Run introduced him as Hyunseok, the individual he had reported about earlier. He announced that he had brought Hyunseok to officially enlist him in the Demon King army. Hemis stepped closer, inspecting him. "He's cute," she commented casually. She expressed her anticipation for his performance, especially since he had been chosen by Reed Run. Hyunseok, though flustered, managed to stammer out that he would do his best. Hemis, however, remarked skeptically, "With that body you won't last long in the demon army." She turned to Reed Run, asking if he agreed. Reed Run nodded, adding, "He'll be eaten alive by the others." Reed Run then noted how rare it was for a human to join the demon army and requested permission to train Hyunseok personally. Hemis's response was swift and firm. "Absolutely not," she said. She explained that Reed Run's time shouldn't be wasted on a human. Then something startling happened. Hemis began to transform. Her head morphed into something resembling a flower, but one with teeth and a long tongue. Hyunseok's jaw dropped in disbelief as he watched her shove her arm into her own mouth. Moments later, her face returned to normal, and in her arms she held a black dog-like creature. She informed Hyunseok that he would now be tasked with caring for her pet. The creature, though small, looked ferocious. "This is Bobo," Hemis introduced him warmly. "Isn't he adorable?" Hyunseok on the inside wondered what kind of pets this could possibly be. He couldn't help but think that it looked like it had come straight from the depths of hell. Also in his own language the name Bobo meant stupid, which added an ironic twist to the situation. Reed Run observed the creature and remarked, "I can sense immense power in it even as a baby." Hemis beamed at the acknowledgement, clearly pleased. Hyunseok, however, remained skeptical. Noticing his hesitation, Hemis asked pointedly about his reaction, intimidating him further. "Don't you like it?" she pressed. Hyunseok quickly backtracked, insisting, "It's an honor to care for Bobo." Satisfied with his answer, Hemis handed Bobo over to him. She advised him, "Bobo is growing, so don't forget to feed him. He gets unpleasant when hungry." She also warned that assigning new caretakers for Bobo had become a challenge, since he had been eating them all. Rachel's voice rang out loudly, surprising everyone. She had noticed a new hero quest in the system window and couldn't contain her shock. Hyunseok shushed her immediately, fearing she might wake Bobo. The quest details appeared before him. Survive by earning Bobo's affection and secure a better future. The reward was 200 hero points. Hyunseok was stunned. Was he really tasked with winning over a commander's pet? Just then the door opened and a goblin entered, knocking on the frame. Hyunseok greeted it politely, but internally he couldn't help but feel uneasy. Having a goblin as his companion made him feel like he was being treated as a snack. Curious, he asked about previous caretakers. The goblin informed him bluntly that there were none left. They were all dead. The goblin explained that from now on, it would be their job to prepare meals for Bobo. "Is that all?" Hyunseok asked. "Yes," the goblin replied, but just as it was about to bark another order, a shadow loomed over it. It was Bobo, licking the goblin's head ominously. Terrified, the goblin clung to Hyunseok's leg, pleading desperately. The goblin even offered Hyunseok his food to save itself. Hyunseok's patience snapped. "What are you doing?" he shouted. The goblin ignored him, knowing one of them wouldn't survive. Furious, Hyunseok grabbed the goblin and hurled it toward Bobo. "You're the one who's dying," he declared as Bobo prepared to make his move. Hyunseok handed the snack to Bobo, who seemed delighted. Without hesitation, Bobo devoured it. Hyunseok and Rachel watched as Bobo happily enjoyed his treat. Later, Rachel found herself in a panic, running for her life. Bobo was chasing her. Desperate for help, she shouted at Hyunseok, but he casually replied, "You better not run too long. He'll get hungry again." Hyunseok's eyes caught something. A new item was available, an extra-large bone. This particular bone could attract Kennedy-type monsters and charm them. It was priced at 30 hero points. Acting quickly, Hyunseok called Bobo and showed him the bone. He threw it and Bobo's eyes lit up with excitement before dashing to fetch it. Meanwhile, Rachel, exhausted from all her flying around, grumbled, "You should have found that sooner." Hyunseok, smug, replied, "That's why my brain doesn't miss the small stuff." He thought the quest would be smooth sailing from then on, but he was wrong. Bobo suddenly lunged at him, narrowly missing and tearing only the hem of his shirt. That's when it hit him. The bone wasn't enough. Bobo needed fresh meat. Rachel asked if he was seriously considering taking Bobo outside. Hyunseok mulled it over, feeling the pressure as Bobo began baring his fangs. Frantically, Hyunseok blurted out the first calming word that came to his mind. "Walk." Bobo froze and immediately changed his demeanor. The feral energy vanished, replaced by a happy, tail-wagging excitement. Bobo even hugged Hyunseok, who sighed in relief. Now outside, Hyunseok searched for the kitchen, but he was utterly lost. Bobo, full of energy, was pulling him in all directions, making things harder. Rachel, scanning the area, admitted she couldn't smell any food. She spotted a goblin and suggested asking it for directions. Hyunseok approached the goblin, who looked puzzled to see a human. As Bobo reverted to his wild nature, the goblin froze in terror. Hyunseok tried to reassure the goblin, explaining it was just Bobo's walk time. The goblin, still horrified, asked why a human was walking Bobo. Bobo licked the goblin's face and Hyunseok firmly told him, "You can't eat him." Hyunseok asked where the kitchen was and the goblin, trembling, pointed to the left before sprinting away. Rachel and Hyunseok stared after him, stunned, before bursting into laughter. The goblin's terror was so over the top, it made them question if he really belonged in the demon army. Once the laughter died down, Hyunseok refocused. He was ready to search for meat in the kitchen. Rachel, however, questioned his long-term plans, asking if he intended to care for a dog forever. Hyunseok scoffed, replying that, of course not, he still had dreams to chase. But when he turned back, Bobo was gone. Panic hit him instantly. He turned pale and shouted, "Where the hell is that dog?" Hyunseok felt despair creeping in. Bobo was a walking disaster, and even looking away for a moment was a mistake. Rachel scanned the surroundings and pointed toward a direction. There they spotted Bobo trotting back toward them. Hyunseok exhaled in relief, scolding, "You scared me half to death." Bobo returned happily, but blood dripped from his mouth, and his stomach was visibly full. Suddenly they heard shouting, "Commander Regis is dead." A vow for revenge echoed through the air. Hyunseok froze in horror. Rachel pointed accusingly at Bobo, whispering, "He's the culprit." Goblin soldiers emerged, and Hyunseok and Rachel began running for their lives. Rachel, gasping, asked if they were about to die. Hyunseok snapped, "Shut up and run." They reached a dead end, cornered by goblins shouting accusations. One goblin vowed to tear off Hyunseok's arms like chicken wings. Another lamented that the commander was already digested, wondering how he would have tasted. Yet another suggested ripping both Hyunseok and Bobo apart, dividing the spoils. Hyunseok forced himself to stay calm and shouted back, "How dare you?" Outnumbered, he needed a plan. Thinking quickly, he lifted Bobo and asked the goblins if they knew who the brave one was. Confused, the goblins stared at Bobo, who they had assumed was just a wild beast. When Hyunseok heard their words, his fury rose and he reprimanded the goblins. He declared that this adorable yet lethal creature was none other than Bobo. The goblins hesitated, recalling that Bobo was rumored to be Commander Hemis's pet, but they dismissed it. They assumed it was just another deceitful trick from a human. Still, some goblins began to worry that Hyunseok might actually be telling the truth. Hyunseok questioned how they could fail to recognize Bobo, calling it a disgrace. The goblins stared at him, baffled by his confidence. Hyunseok, maintaining his composure, commanded Bobo to unleash his beast mode. Without hesitation, Bobo obeyed, transforming into a ferocious predator, saliva dripping as if anticipating a meal. Hyunseok addressed the goblins again, reaffirming, "This is Bobo." He then ordered, "Bobo, bite him." Bobo let out a deafening roar and pounced on the nearest goblin. Blood splattered as Bobo's teeth tore into his target. Hyunseok watched the grisly scene unfold, casually remarking, "A dog without a muzzle sure gets messy." When Bobo finished, only the goblin's bones remained. Turning to the others, Hyunseok asked mockingly, "Anyone else doubt who Bobo is?" The goblins frantically apologized, claiming they had no idea it was really Bobo. At that moment, a system notification appeared before Hyunseok. It revealed that his extraordinary charisma had subdued numerous demons, increasing his hidden charisma stat. Hyunseok grinned, pleased with the recognition. Just then, a voice from behind interrupted him. A calm but commanding presence addressed the group, wondering aloud about the commotion. It was Commander Hemis. She surveyed the scene, amused, commenting that the cute newbie was causing quite the stir outside. Hyunseok felt his blood run cold. Standing in her office had been nerve-wracking enough, but now facing her here was even worse. Hemis chuckled, clearly entertained by Hyunseok's audacity in using her name and Bobo to survive. Hyunseok bowed deeply, admitting he had committed a severe offense. Hemis raised an eyebrow, confused, as she had actually intended to compliment him. She admired his resourcefulness and wit, contrasting him with the less clever demons she often dealt with. "You've got guts too," she added with a smirk. Hyunseok stammered out a hesitant thank you, unsure if her words were genuine praise or a veiled threat. Hemis elaborated, sharing how the demon army relied heavily on brute strength, often creating unnecessary chaos. When Hyunseok inquired what kind of trouble she meant, she cryptically replied, "You'll find out soon enough." She shifted the conversation, once again suggesting he consider becoming an executive in the demon army. Hyunseok was stunned, feeling entirely unqualified, but Hemis dismissed his self-doubt. "You can't keep using my name and Bobo forever," she declared. She explained that the army had a decisive duel system where one could claim their opponent's rank. She gave him 1 month to prepare for a battle. If he won, she would extend her protection for another month. If he continued to succeed, he might even rise to the rank of battalion commander and prove useful. Hyunseok hesitantly asked what would happen if he lost. "You'll regret surviving the battle," she replied coldly, implying that failure would lead to a fate worse than death. Left with no other option, Hyunseok accepted. Hemis even chose his opponent on the spot. Rachel, standing nearby, sighed dramatically, predicting she would be saying goodbye to him in a month. Hyunseok glared at her, reminding her that she was the one who had claimed he had SSS rank potential. Rachel shrugged, explaining that potential only indicated possibility, not certainty. "You're a fairy," Hyunseok snapped, "but you can't even be supportive." As he fumed, Hyunseok noticed something unsettling. The doors ahead were streaked with blood. He wondered aloud if it was truly the kitchen. Cautiously he pushed the doors open. Inside, a towering red-skinned ogre-like figure greeted him. "You must be the human our commander mentioned," the monster said, introducing himself as Culkin, the demon army's chef. Culkin asked what business Hyunseok had in the kitchen. Hyunseok remained outside the threshold, explaining he was just there to get a snack for Bobo. Culkin's eyes narrowed as he realized that Bobo's caretaker had changed yet again. However, he refused Hyunseok's request outright, leaving him dumbfounded. Culkin explained there was no reason for him to help a human. The only order from Commander Hemis was to spare Hyunseok's life. Desperate, Hyunseok asked if there was any way to negotiate, emphasizing that the food was for Bobo. After some thought, Culkin proposed a solution. If Hyunseok truly wanted meat, he would have to hunt it himself like the goblins did. Hyunseok paled as he glanced at the goblins, who were busy chopping up what looked disturbingly like other goblins. He realized with a sinking feeling that Culkin's idea of hunting was far more gruesome than he had anticipated. The next thing we knew, Hyunseok found himself standing before a colossal, ferocious wild boar. He had been informed that this creature would be his dinner tonight, if he managed to kill it. As he stood there, Hyunseok couldn't help but reflect on how he had ended up in such a precarious situation. This same boar had already claimed Morgan's life. Although they called it a hunt, the boar seemed to do nothing but charge relentlessly at its opponents. The cooks had sworn to avenge Morgan. Hyunseok, observing the chaos, quipped that it was unclear who would ultimately be having dinner. Rachel, ever the pragmatist, asked what their next move should be and even suggested they run. Hyunseok shook his head, pointing out that escaping from such a massive crowd wasn't an option. Still, he couldn't deny how perilous his position was. Resolving to act, Hyunseok began to move, but Culkin's voice stopped him. Instinctively, Hyunseok responded, volunteering to go next. But to his surprise, Culkin informed him that there was no need. The hunt was over. Hyunseok was taken aback. All this time he thought they were mindlessly charging at the boar. How had they brought it down so efficiently? A goblin reported to Culkin, tallying 12 dead and numerous injured. In Hyunseok's mind, the cost was far too great. Culkin, however, seemed unfazed, calling the results amazing and declaring a short break before they resumed hunting their next prey. Hyunseok noticed how little Culkin cared about the casualties. As the cooks busied themselves, Hyunseok confided to Rachel that escaping was no longer an option. Rachel asked if he intended to join the monster hunts with the others. Hyunseok replied with a firm no, explaining he had no reason to. He mulled over his predicament and concluded that the only way to increase his stats was to level up, which meant he needed experience points. Rachel agreed with his logic but asked where he planned to find such experience in their current situation. Shamelessly, Hyunseok inquired if he would still earn experience points if he only landed the killing blow. Rachel confirmed that he would, though she called his plan disgraceful. Her confirmation fueled Hyunseok's determination. He thanked her and told her they should get moving. Hyunseok knew his options were limited. He had to grow stronger within a month, especially if Commander Hemis's threats were genuine. Approaching Culkin, Hyunseok expressed his desire to participate in the next hunt as a member of the brave demon army. Culkin stared at him, making Hyunseok nervous. Had he overstepped? But Culkin grinned, declaring that he liked Hyunseok's audacity. Hyunseok, relieved, offered his thanks while slipping in a few compliments to appease Culkin further. Much to his surprise, Culkin assigned Hyunseok the role of leading the next hunt. Culkin explained that for their group, the leader's position was the most honorable, reserved for exceptional cases. Hyunseok, feigning humility, protested that he couldn't possibly stand before the noble demons, adding that the other cooks might object to him taking charge. Culkin, unbothered, simply gave him a thumbs up. Their exchange was interrupted by an urgent call for Culkin. "What's wrong?" the chef asked. A cook reported a monster invasion, describing the sound of the monster's cry as a signal that an urn had arrived. Hyunseok, confused, asked if they were in danger. Culkin dismissed the concern, though he added that urn meat wasn't particularly good. Drawing a knife from his back, Culkin rallied everyone to arm themselves, announcing that they would hunt the urn and add its meat to the dinner menu. Hyunseok saw this as an opportunity. All he had to do was stay close and land the final blow. Rachel handed him something. A system notification appeared, showing a slight boost to his health and strength for 3 minutes. Rachel confidently brushed off his gratitude, but instead of thanking her, Hyunseok bonked her on the head, grumbling about why she hadn't used it on him earlier. Motivated, Hyunseok sprinted to position himself for the last hit. As he ran, he forced himself to focus on his goals. He pictured a noble blonde lady, no less than 5 children with bunny-like features and a peaceful retirement. He wasn't planning to die again as a defeated, loveless loser. With renewed determination, Hyunseok leapt into the fray, punching the urn with all his might. The monster fell, and with its death came a flood of system notifications. Hyunseok was stunned to see his level increase by 4 from a single killing blow. At this rate, he realized he could hit level 20 within a single day. Elated, Hyunseok felt empowered. Finally, he could grow stronger. Moments later, a trembling cook approached the dead urn, raising a butcher's knife. Before the cook could act, Hyunseok casually elbowed him, claiming his arm had slipped. He laughed maniacally, his grin wide and menacing. It was almost as if he had lost his mind when he declared that every last hit in the world was now his to claim. Time passed and more monsters were slain. Rachel, visibly drained, asked if they were finished now. Hyunseok smirked and praised his buff bot companion for her assistance. All the monsters had been dealt with, and it seemed like the cooks had wrapped up their butchering. But upon closer inspection, he realized the cooks were already gorging themselves on the fresh meat. One of them even shouted for a larger serving, leaving Hyunseok utterly baffled. Culkin caught sight of him staring and called out, asking what had captured his attention. Hyunseok questioned whether it was acceptable for the cooks to indulge in the army's food like this. Culkin responded nonchalantly, explaining that it was one of the cook's privileges, especially since monster meat spoils quickly. He added that for common soldiers, having fresh meat was a rare and special opportunity. The chef even admitted that enjoying good food was the main thing keeping him going. A flood of questions raced through Hyunseok's mind, like what kind of privilege this was or how they managed without a labor union. Despite his skepticism, the chef offered him a portion of the meat, saying he had earned it as a warrior. Hyunseok hesitated, staring at the meat and contemplating how much the cooks had risked for it. Eventually he took a bite. The flavor wasn't bad, there was a strong smell that oddly enhanced the taste, but overall the meat was bland and chewy. Hyunseok couldn't help but think that, back in South Korea, this kind of meat wouldn't sell for long. The realization struck him. These cooks were risking their lives for mediocre meat. His thoughts shifted to an idea. What if he created a dish better than this? It dawned on him that he could win their loyalty through their stomachs, earning their favor and becoming the kitchen's god. He opened the Hero Shop interface, much to Rachel's surprise. After spending points on a skill and an item, he revealed his purchases. A cooking skill ranked F, costing 50 points, and a seasoning loaded with MSG for 20 points. Rachel looked at him in disbelief, scolding him for wasting points on salt. Hyunseok dismissed her criticism, explaining that she was underestimating its potential. He demonstrated, sprinkling the seasoning over the meat. The transformation was immediate. The aroma became rich and the meat turned juicy and inviting. Hyunseok felt triumphant, imagining himself as the god of this new culinary world. He presented the enhanced meat to Culkin, who initially declined, saying he was already full. But Hyunseok insisted, claiming he had poured his soul into the dish and could die happy if Culkin tasted it. Reluctantly, Culkin took a bite. The flavor transported him to his childhood. He remembered his mother asking if he wanted meat for dinner, a memory so vivid it brought tears to his eyes. Afterward, Hyunseok left with a bag of meat, a gift from the chef, who reminded him that it would stay fresh for only 2 days. When Hyunseok returned, Bobo charged at him, startling him. Quickly, he handed over the meat, calming Bobo instantly. Hyunseok encouraged Bobo to eat to his heart's content, pulling out every piece of meat from the bag. Bobo devoured it happily, and Hyunseok even promised to bring more tomorrow, earning a boost in Bobo's affinity. This also completed their hero quest, awarding them 200 hero points, exactly as Hyunseok had planned. Rachel noticed his success and pointed out an item on his screen that could enhance his stats. When she asked why he hadn't used it, Hyunseok explained that he avoided it because he didn't know how it worked. blaming it certain idiots who had skipped the tutorial. Rachel, unfazed, reassured him that it wasn't too late. She began explaining how bonus points worked. Strength increases power. Stamina boosts endurance and resilience. Agility improves reflexes and speed. Mana corresponds to magic. When Hyunseok asked about charisma, Rachel explained it was a hidden stat that couldn't be leveled up with bonus points, only through proper training. She advised him to balance the stats equally, but Hyunseok disagreed, believing it would be more effective to focus solely on strength. Rachel was taken aback by his train of thought. She explained that while focusing on strength might work at the beginning, mana becomes crucial as things progress. It's clear that a body enhanced by mana far surpasses one built purely on muscle training. Hyunseok adjusted his points and asked Rachel if the distribution was acceptable. Rachel examined it and admitted it wasn't bad. She then instructed him to visit the shop and purchase a fundamental skill for mana control. Curious, Hyunseok asked what mana control entailed. Rachel explained that it was essentially a skill to help him manage and manipulate his mana efficiently. She estimated the cost at around 100 hero points. Hyunseok began searching for it in the shop, only to find nothing. Rachel was shocked as it was supposed to be a common item. Disappointed, Hyunseok muttered how he'd thought she'd finally be of use. Frustrated, he even accused her of being completely useless. Rachel defended herself, insisting it should have been there. 3 weeks later, Hyunseok reached level 100, but the process had taken longer than he expected. Rachel remarked that the experience points required increased significantly as he leveled up. Hyunseok pondered whether any other heroes were working as tirelessly as he was. Rachel informed him that he had already become a sinecure. Hyunseok found that hard to believe. He berated Rachel, reminding her of the countless times he had nearly died that day. Rachel explained that most people take about 6 months to reach level 100. She added with some sadness that she wanted to get along with him, but Hyunseok retorted that she had brought it upon herself. At that moment, the door opened and a goblin entered, informing Hyunseok that the commander wanted to see him. When Hyunseok arrived at Hemis's office, she greeted him warmly. She remarked that he looked healthier than before and had clearly grown stronger. She noticed that his mana had doubled. Hyunseok explained that he had been working hard to provide the best quality meat for Bobo every day. Hemis, however, commented on how rapidly his strength was increasing. She asked if it had something to do with the hero leveling system. Hyunseok froze, realizing that Hemis knew he was a hero. He wondered how long she had known. Hemis assured him that she had figured it out the first time they met. He asked her how she knew. She explained that she had a connection to someone who was deeply interested in heroes. Hemis then asked why he thought she had summoned him. Hyunseok tried to guess, mentioning his recent battles. She reminded him of their promise and asked if he remembered it. When Hyunseok affirmed that he did, she scolded him for his behavior. Suddenly, Hemis transformed into a monstrous flower-eating creature. She expressed her frustration with how quickly he was leveling and warned him to work harder if he wanted to survive. For her, it was all about entertainment. Hyunseok recalled how crowds are most thrilled not by flashy performances or easy victories but by dramatic, unexpected twists. He realized she had set him up against an opponent he could never hope to beat. Rachel, panicked, yelled, asking what his plan was. Hyunseok told her to stay calm and let him think. He reasoned that his best course of action was to gather as much information as possible about the opponent before the battle. Hyunseok intended to study their strength carefully. Rachel pointed out that they only had the opponent's name, questioning how he planned to identify them. Hyunseok revealed his plan to buy an item from the hero shop called the Combat Power Meter. The device, costing 50 hero points, would measure an individual's strength, stamina, agility, and mana. Hyunseok intended to use it to gauge his opponent's power level and then train against someone with a similar level. Rachel sighed, teasing him for only being clever in critical moments. Hyunseok fired back, saying it was better than always being useless. They tested the combat power meter on Rachel first. Her combat power was 375. She admitted she couldn't tell if that was high or low, so she suggested measuring Hyunseok's. Hyunseok handed her the device, waiting for the results. However, Rachel appeared confused. Hyunseok asked if she had seen anything. Rachel hesitated, then claimed the device must be broken, as she couldn't comprehend why his stats were higher than hers. Hyunseok's strength was revealed to be 1,560. He smugly asked Rachel if she was sure she wasn't the weaker one between the two of them. Rachel, feeling dejected, admitted she had a strength level of 10,000 just a month ago. Hyunseok asked if the combat power meter had worked properly despite her doubts. They checked Bobo's combat strength, and the damn dog had an insane 47,422 strength. Rachel felt utterly humiliated knowing that both she and Hyunseok were weaker than a dog. Hyunseok found the situation amusing, joking that maybe Bobo's breed had received a buff. Stepping outside, he decided to survey the strength levels of other orcs. He noticed that goblins, who looked the weakest, had considerably lower stats compared to the other orcs, most of whom had numbers comparable to his own. Suddenly, someone announced Captain Bulkman's arrival, prompting everyone to salute. As the captain passed by, Hyunseok used the combat power meter and discovered Bulkman's strength was an impressive 14,300. Hyunseok observed that individuals with combat strength over 10,000 typically held commander-level positions. He confirmed with Rachel whether his opponent was truly a platoon leader. Rachel affirmed this, adding that the opponent's name was Kirkin. Rumor had it that Kirkin was an orc with the intelligence of a pig. Hyunseok reasoned that a platoon leader should only have around 3,000 strength, meaning he might have a shot if he leveled up some more. Determined, he searched for Kirkin. When he found him, the combat power meter showed Kirkin's strength at 6,671. Rachel bluntly stated that the situation essentially meant Hyunseok was being sent to die. At that moment, Hyunseok received a hero quest. The system window displayed a notification, stating that his odds of defeating Kirkin were almost zero. However, because persevering through impossible situations was his defining trait, he was being given a chance. He needed to raise his combat strength to 3,000 within a week. The reward? 300 hero points. Hyunseok sarcastically commented on how perfectly timed the quest was, jokingly wondering if the system was spying on him. Despite the grim odds, he accepted the challenge, realizing it was a do-or-die situation. He resolved to outwit both his observer and Hemis to survive. The next morning in the kitchen, Hyunseok made his presence known. Culkin greeted him and took note of the goggles Hyunseok was wearing, finding them intriguing. He asked where Hyunseok had gotten them. Hyunseok casually replied that he'd seen others wearing them and decided to get a pair himself. Culkin speculated that it must be a trend among the younger generation before quickly changing the topic. He instructed Hyunseok to get ready for the hunt. Curious, Hyunseok used the combat power meter on Culkin and discovered his strength was an overwhelming 35,230. This perplexed Hyunseok as it far exceeded the typical strength of a captain. Looking around, he realized that even the other cooks had high combat strengths due to their constant battles with demonic beasts. This gave Hyunseok an idea. If he could spar against someone with a similar strength level to Kirkin, he could prepare himself better for the upcoming fight. Hyunseok requested permission from Culkin to spar with one of the cooks, explaining that it would help him improve and contribute more effectively. Culkin initially dismissed the idea, stating that Hyunseok was already strong enough for a human and didn't need to rush things. However, Hyunseok subtly threatened Culkin, saying he'd eat the high-quality meat for himself if he wasn't allowed to spar. Reluctantly, Culkin relented and asked Hyunseok to choose his sparring partner. Later, as the cooks prepared for the hunt, they were surprised to learn that Hyunseok was planning to fight Golbachev, a cook with a combat strength of 2,620. Some wondered if this would be Hyunseok's last day alive. The goblins, however, voiced their discontent, as they didn't want to lose Hyunseok, who provided them with delicious meat. Hearing the commotion, Culkin silenced the goblins and warned Golbachev not to kill Hyunseok during the sparring session. He instructed him to go easy and not overdo it. Golbachev, looking rather dim-witted, agreed. However, Culkin clearly doubted his sincerity. The spar began. Hyunseok, brimming with determination, charged at Golbachev. Golbachev reminded himself of Culkin's warning not to kill Hyunseok. When he swung a punch, Hyunseok skillfully dodged, observing that Golbachev's movements were largely instinctual. Capitalizing on this, Hyunseok launched a counterattack. The fight felt oddly familiar to him, reminiscent of battles he had consistently won in the past. In the blink of an eye, the match concluded, with Hyunseok declared the victor. The goblins were in disbelief. Golbachev had been taken down so quickly that some hadn't even registered what had happened. Hyunseok, equally shocked, realized he had defeated Golbachev with a single kick. This unexpected victory sparked a newfound confidence in him, making him believe he might have a shot against Kirkin after all. At the northern edge of the Black Fortress, near the Great Forest, Hyunseok replayed the spar in his mind. The fact that he had knocked out an orc with double his strength using just one kick reinforced his belief that combat strength was merely a number and not an absolute measure. He concluded that with a bit more improvement he could secure an easy win in his upcoming fight. Just then, a goblin approached Culkin to report a large number of Talas appearing up ahead. Culkin, visibly annoyed, asked if they were within Tala's territory. Hyunseok, curious, asked what the problem was. He questioned if it was because Tala's meat tasted bad. Culkin clarified that their meat wasn't too unpleasant. In fact, their bone marrow was considered a great delicacy. However, Talas lived in groups and had remarkably strong maternal instincts. If anyone harmed their young, it would lead to serious trouble. Hyunseok assumed the hunt would stop there, but Culkin, craving their flavorful meat, decided to proceed. He commanded everyone to attack, declaring that Tala's meat would be their snack for the day. He ordered them not to let any Talas escape and to slaughter them on the spot. The creatures resembled spiders with skull-like structures on their bodies. Hyunseok slyly shoved a goblin, feigning an accident, and seized the opportunity to land final blows to rack up XP. After some time, the group had amassed a collection of slain Talas. Hyunseok delivered the finishing blow to the last one, leveling up as a result. Rachel praised him for being a pro at stealing final hits. Accepting the compliment, Hyunseok explained that this was precisely why he enjoyed working in the kitchen. Suddenly, an overwhelming pressure enveloped the area, catching Hyunseok off guard. As he turned, someone screamed. The Talas queen had arrived. Her fury was palpable as she saw the pile of dead Talas. With a growl, she expressed her rage. Curious about her strength, Hyunseok used his goggles to assess her stats, only to find her power was immeasurable. The horrifying reality was clear. They had just mercilessly killed her children. Hyunseok spun around to ask the chef what to do, only to find him fleeing. The chef shouted for everyone to survive and meet again later. Hyunseok thought bitterly about the chef's irresponsibility when a loud noise drew his attention. Someone barked orders for everyone to scatter. Weak goblins were being torn apart as the enraged Tala's queen screamed, her cry so deafening that Hyunseok had to cover his ears to endure it. Rachel alerted him to look behind, and when he turned, he saw hundreds of Talas charging toward him, led by the queen herself. Naturally, Hyunseok bolted as fast as he could, with goblins in the distance screaming for help. He knew that if he paused for even a moment he'd be dead. Eventually he stumbled upon a cave and hesitated, wondering if it was safe. Rachel reassured him it was empty, claiming she had scouted it earlier. Though Hyunseok didn't fully trust her, he figured the cave was safer than the forest, where he was vulnerable on all sides. The cave was surprisingly deep. He asked Rachel if it was a natural formation, but she didn't know. She did note how spacious it was, large enough for even the Talas queen to enter. An idea began to form in Hyunseok's mind as he spotted a gooey substance on the wall. Rachel dismissed the possibility of it being a Talas hideout, citing the chef's claim that no Talas groups were nearby. However, the sticky residue unsettled Hyunseok. Were these spider webs? Then he saw them eggs. Realizing the cave was a Talas nest, he knew it wasn't a safe place after all. Just as he decided to leave, glowing green eyes emerged from the shadows. A fully grown Talas charged at him. Hyunseok sprinted as fast as he could, with Rachel frantically asking if they were heading in the right direction. Hyunseok admitted he had no idea. This was his first time in the cave too. Suddenly he stepped on something, lost his footing and slipped. Panicked, he grabbed the first object he could find and hurled it at the Talas. The creature caught the object in midair, an egg. To Hyunseok's surprise, the Talas stopped attacking, seemingly distracted by the egg. He turned to Rachel for an explanation. Rachel theorized that the Talas might have found the egg appealing due to its round, smooth and moist texture, noting that it resembled a Talas egg. Inspired, Hyunseok grabbed another egg and taunted the Talas, declaring he wouldn't take any more of its nonsense. The Talas panicked, confirming that his strategy was working. Taking a firm stance, Hyunseok hurled the egg. The Talas scrambled to catch it, reacting almost desperately. Rachel observed the Talas's impressive agility and physique, likely enhanced by its monstrous nature. She questioned Hyunseok about his next move. Hyunseok, exasperated, asked what options he had left when there were still over 100 eggs scattered around. Despite the situation, Hyunseok even dared to taunt the Talas when one of the eggs cracked. He mockingly told the Talas that he could probably catch better than it could. Hyunseok ordered Rachel to fetch him another egg, but she informed him that they were down to the last one. Panic set in as Hyunseok turned pale, realizing he had seriously messed up. The Talas let out a furious growl and lunged at them. Hyunseok quickly ordered Rachel to cast a buff spell. The Talas queen was seething with rage, but Hyunseok noticed that she was already drained from chasing after the eggs. He steadied himself and focused, knowing he could seize victory. As the Talas queen charged at him, Hyunseok prepared his ultimate attack, Paradise Reincarnation shot. Instead of retreating, he confronted the monster head-on, delivering a powerful strike that defeated the Talas. Several system notifications popped up, confirming that Hyunseok had leveled up. Rachel rushed over to check on him, asking if he was alright. Hyunseok admitted he wasn't, joking that he felt like he was dying right then and there. He suggested they find a safer spot. To his surprise, Rachel revealed that she could also use healing magic. Hyunseok praised her, remarking that investing in mana points had really paid off. Rachel, however, modestly explained that her magic wasn't very potent and could mostly just stop bleeding. Hyunseok allocated his newly earned stat points and decided to head back. At level 108, his stats now stood at Strength 56 plus 2, Agility 53 plus 2, Stamina 55 plus 2, Mana 53 plus 2 and Charisma 27. He felt a sense of accomplishment with his now balanced stats, even though he wasn't sure how to utilize them all just yet. He considered it an investment for future endeavors. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed in the cave. It was Culkin, delighted to see Hyunseok alive. Hyunseok asked why Culkin was there. Culkin explained that he'd found the cave while fleeing and thought they were lucky to have made it out alive. But Culkin froze when he realized it was the Tala's nest. He spotted the scattered items on the ground. Hyunseok revealed that they were Tala's eggs, explaining that this was where the Talas laid them. Culkin's eyes lit up upon hearing this. He excitedly mentioned that Tala's eggs were an extremely rare delicacy, reserved for high-ranking officials. Hyunseok, irritated, yelled at Culkin to focus since they needed to escape. Culkin remarked that the Tala's queen was likely already in the cave and admitted that defeating her would require someone of division commander rank or higher. He resigned himself to the idea that the egg would be his final meal. Suddenly, voices echoed from the entrance. The surviving goblins had arrived, along with the head chef. Culkin acknowledged those who barely made it and offered them a taste of the precious egg. Hyunseok silently vowed not to let this be his last meal, especially since he hadn't yet enjoyed his wife's 5-dish spread. Determined, he refused to die in such a pitiful place. Meanwhile, in Hemis's office, someone greeted the commander, commenting on his usual stiff demeanor. She inquired if he had completed his assigned mission. Readrun reported that he had successfully captured the Holy Empire's next saintess as instructed. Impressed, Hemis praised Readrun for infiltrating a fanatical cult in just 3 weeks. She patted his head, causing him to blush. Their moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Annoyed, Hemis remarked on the interruption. A goblin informed her of an urgent report regarding the cooks sent to gather ingredients. Hemis dismissed it at first, assuming it was a routine issue, but the goblin clarified that the incident was severe. The Tala's queen had appeared, leaving most of the cooks, including Culkin, dead or missing. Hemis asked about Hyunseok, to which the goblin reported that he was also missing. Hearing this, Readrun's expression darkened. Back in the cave, the goblins were toasting with Tala's eggs, resigned to their fate. Culkin bid them farewell, but Hyunseok smacked him on the head, yelling at him to snap out of it. Culkin gave him a bewildered look as if asking, "What the hell?" Hyunseok replied that Culkin seemed to be under some wicked spell and claimed he used a secret weapon to wake him. With a triumphant grin, Hyunseok pulled out a new item, the Beast Encyclopedia, Demonic Beast Edition. The encyclopedia contained detailed information on nearly all demonic beasts and required 50 hero points to acquire. He searched for information about the Talos, a spider-like demonic beast that lives in colonies and is known for its exceptionally strong legs. To defeat a Talos, one must aim for its weaker spots such as the torso and head. The bodily fluids of the Talos are extremely flammable, and its eggs contain a substance as volatile as a bomb. The caves constructed with the Talos saliva are also highly susceptible to fire, so using flame magic inside them is a dangerous gamble. Hyunseok turned to Culkin, asking if he could wield fire magic. Culkin admitted he could, but only for simple attacks like shooting flames. With a resigned sigh, Culkin advised Hyunseok to abandon his efforts, warning that the Talos carapace was too tough for his flames to penetrate. Hyunseok dismissed his concerns, stating that he had no intention of burning the Talos directly. Gathering the group, he unveiled his plan. He emphasized that they needed to survive so they could continue enjoying delicacies like the Talos eggs. The goblins, however, thought his plan was futile. Hyunseok cleverly tempted them by promising an unlimited feast of premium demonic beast meat as a celebration if they made it out alive. Their eyes sparkled with renewed determination, and Culkin, drooling at the thought, eagerly asked about the plan. Pleased with their motivation, Hyunseok explained the details, stressing that no matter what, they must not stop running until they reached the exit. With the plan set, they moved out. Soon they encountered a swarm of Talos. Hyunsuk signaled Culkin to prepare his flames. At the right moment, Culkin unleashed fire, causing part of the cave to erupt in an explosion. Rachel observed the chaos and asked Hyunsuk what he had done. He explained that by allowing the fire to spread, the remaining eggs deeper in the cave would act as a distraction. This would keep the Talos occupied long enough for them to escape. Hyunsuk instructed the goblins to stay focused on surviving and to throw an egg as a diversion if needed. With only one egg left in his possession, they had to locate the exit before using it. As they pressed on, Rachel spotted light ahead. Hyunsuk guided the group toward it, urging them to keep running. Relief washed over them as they reached the light, but it was short-lived. Standing in their path was the Talos Queen. Hyunsuk's expression darkened as the massive creature blocked their way. Culkin, equally dismayed, whispered that the Queen had returned, believing their doom was imminent. But Hyunsuk refused to give up. He noticed the Queen wasn't attacking them outright. Sensing an opportunity, he addressed her directly. He instructed Culkin to ignite something, then held up the last egg, threatening to detonate it. "If this explodes," Hyunsuk warned, "we all die, your offspring included." The Queen hesitated, her gaze fixed on the egg. Hyunsuk intensified his demand, urging her to step aside. The Queen screeched loudly, causing tension to rise. Rachel anxiously asked what they should do next. Hyunsuk, out of ideas, lit the egg and hurled it toward the cave wall. The egg detonated, igniting a fire that spread rapidly. The ground trembled as the cave began to collapse. The goblins, terrified, scrambled to escape. Hyunsuk shouted for everyone to prioritize getting out alive. But as he fled, he suddenly froze, distracted by a system notification. He had leveled up. Rachel, exasperated, yelled at him to move before he was buried in the rubble. Glancing back, Hyunsuk saw the Talos Queen being crushed beneath the falling debris. More notifications flooded his vision. He had leveled up repeatedly. The realization hit him. All the Talos killed in the collapse had counted as his experience points. This was, without a doubt, speed EXP farming at its finest. Hyunsuk stood there, dumbfounded, before deciding to focus on escaping. He called out to Rachel for a buff, which she promptly provided. Emerging from the chaos, they faced one final challenge. The Queen Talos was still in their way. Culkin, desperate to create a diversion, pulled out an egg and shouted, "This is for you, Queen." He offered the Queen an egg in exchange for a way out. Hyunsuk recognized it as an opportunity. Determined to survive, he sprinted with all his might. The Queen spat a green fluid resembling spider silk, and Hyunsuk began to wonder if this was truly the end for him. Suddenly, red hands grabbed hold of a large trunk. A familiar voice asked if he was all right. Hyunsuk realized he was being dragged. To his astonishment, it was Reed Run. Reed Run was visibly pleased to find Hyunsuk alive, just as he had anticipated. He confidently declared he would handle the situation. Reed Run wielded the massive trunk and struck the Talos Queen with a devastating blow. The Queen emitted a deafening screech as Reed Run assumed a combat stance. Hyunsuk couldn't hold back his admiration and exclaimed how incredible Reed Run was. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing. Later, at the Demon King's Black Castle, they discovered grim news. Out of the 105 goblin packs in the Demon King's army, only 6 had survived. 99 were either dead or missing, including Culkin. In Bobo's room, the enormous beast whimpered and clung to Hyunsuk, straddling him like a child. Hyunsuk consoled the emotional Bobo, teasingly saying he had returned from the dead just to see him. Rachel commented on how fortunate they were to have survived, crediting the cow-headed figure. Meanwhile, Bobo kept licking Hyunsuk's face affectionately. Hyunsuk replied to Rachel, saying they should cherish their moments of peace, as the looming finals could very well get them killed. Rachel asked for clarification. Hyunsuk explained that finals were approaching fast. Rachel observed that Hyunsuk had matured significantly, and she wasn't wrong. Thanks to the collapsed cave, Hyunsuk had gained a staggering 75 levels in one fell swoop. His current level stood at 200, but Rachel remarked that it still felt inadequate. Hyunsuk shared her sentiment, especially when faced with an opponent boasting over 6,000 battle power. Rachel tested him with a question. Would attaining 6,000 battle power make him as strong as an orc? Hyunsuk replied that it wasn't solely about power level. Rachel confirmed his answer, explaining that such strength also relies on magic. She urged him to master magic if he hoped to confront such adversaries. Hyunsuk admitted it wasn't as simple as it sounded. Rachel reminded him of a moment when he had inadvertently used magic in the past. Hyunsuk, puzzled, was unaware of having done so. Rachel confessed that it was far too basic to be called magic. Hyunseok finally understood. The surge of power he had felt back then was indeed magic. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted when the door swung open. Both were caught off guard as Reed Run entered. Hyunseok asked why someone like Reed Run would visit such a modest room. Reed Run informed him that he was there to summon him to meet the great commander at Hemis's office. When Hemis saw Reed Run, she inquired about his unusual presence. Reed Run explained that he had a personal matter to discuss. He requested permission to teach Hyunseok the art of battle. Hyunseok was shocked. Hemis asked for the reasoning behind this. Reed Run explained that Ork Harkin, a platoon leader, had been exhibiting extraordinary potential and seemed suited for the position of deputy battalion commander. If things continued this way, Hyunseok was certain to lose. Reed Run expressed his belief in Hyunseok's immense potential and his desire to witness what Hyunseok could achieve in the future. Hyunseok was dumbfounded, certain the commander would reject the proposal. To his surprise, Hemis approved. Reed Run expressed his gratitude and Hemis dismissed them, stating she had work to attend to. Before they left, she noted how much stronger Hyunseok had grown since their last meeting. While she admired his rapid development, it also irritated her as it posed a threat to Kirkin. She resolved to grant Kirkin something to even the odds. Reed Run led Hyunseok to his personal training ground, a vast space that amazed Hyunseok. He reflected on how much respect Hemis had for Reed Run. Reed Run, observing in silence, noticed Hyunseok's body was brimming with mana, yet he couldn't utilize any of it. He realized Hyunseok's rapid growth left little time for mastering the basics. With the battle only 4 days away, there wasn't enough time. Reed Run concluded there was only one solution. He clenched his fist and declared that pain was an integral part of growth. Advising Hyunseok to stay alert, he delivered a punch directly to his face. While crashing onto the ground, Hyunseok couldn't help but question if this guy was completely out of his mind. Here he was supposedly training him, yet he was beating him to a pulp. Hyunseok shouted at Reed Run to focus. Otherwise he'd die if he didn't learn to block with mana. Determined, Hyunseok tried to shield himself from Reed Run's incoming kick by raising his forearm. He quickly leapt backward to create some distance. Gathering his strength, Hyunseok launched a counterkick. Reed Run found it peculiar. Although Hyunseok's physical strength was nothing remarkable, his reaction speed and perceptiveness rivaled those of a seasoned knight. Reed Run recognized that Hyunseok's fighting spirit was extraordinary. It became clear to Reed Run that it wasn't by sheer luck that he couldn't dodge Hyunseok's kick. Hyunseok's combat instincts were refined to an astonishing degree. Deciding to trust Hyunseok's innate sense of battle, Reed Run planned his next move. He reminded Hyunseok of the wager with the commander, emphasizing that without mastering mana, he had no chance of defeating Kirkin. With a cold resolve, he added that it was better to die here than suffer defeat in front of everyone. Then with a powerful punch, Reed Run hurled Hyunseok into the air. Hyunseok realized in that moment that Reed Run wasn't bluffing. Another hit like that might actually kill him. His mind wandered to his unfulfilled dream of getting married and having adorable children. But Reed Run wasn't giving him time to reminisce. He was already pursuing Hyunseok mid-air, leaving Hyunseok with only two choices: die or block the attack. Praying to God, Hyunseok clenched his fist and prepared to retaliate. The next moment, the ground trembled from the impact of someone crashing into it. That someone was Hyunseok. The force of his landing shattered a significant portion of the terrain. Rachel, standing nearby, was visibly alarmed. Reed Run approached Hyunseok's motionless body, observing him carefully. He declared that Hyunseok had just managed to control his own mana for the first time and asked if he had noticed. Raising his hand weakly, Hyunseok gave a thumbs up, joking that God had answered his prayers. His ridiculous expression made Reed Run chuckle. Reed Run reassured him, saying he'd win if he continued progressing like this. He grabbed Hyunseok's arm and instructed him to stay still so he could heal him. But as soon as Reed Run began, Hyunseok let out a groan of pain, clutching his neck. Reed Run had forgotten an important detail. Dark mana was akin to poison for humans. Realizing his mistake, Reed Run apologized profusely, scooping Hyunseok into his arms and urging him to stay alive. In this world, certain powers inherently counter each other. Dark mana counters regular mana. Mana counters divine power, and divine power counters dark mana. Mana was the domain of humans. Dark mana belonged to demons, while divine power was reserved for the devout followers of God. The Church of Tussis, the most influential religious institution, had waged wars to bring all other faiths under its control. Now, as the divine empire of Gatron, They anointed a chosen individual capable of hearing God's voice and revered her as the saintess. Somewhere within the Demon King's stronghold, rumors swirled about the captured saintess locked in her room. The next saintess of the Divine Empire, Abelson Marriott, was now a prisoner of the demon army. There were murmurs of doubt among the demons. She hadn't prayed in days, casting suspicion on her claim as the saintess. Still, they trusted Reed Run's judgment in capturing her. Abelson, on the other hand, saw no reason to pray. She believed her current circumstances were preferable to her time in the church. Suddenly, the door burst open and Reed Run barged in, carrying Hyunseok in his arms. Abelson immediately chastised him for his rudeness. Ignoring her, Reed Run demanded that she heal the human. Hyunseok's head throbbed, and he began to wonder what Reed Run had done to him. It was almost comical. His last thought was regretting that the last hand he held belonged to a man instead of Rachel. When he opened his eyes, he was greeted by the sight of a silver-haired beauty. His immediate thought was that he had died again and ended up in some random place. Hyunseok began lamenting loudly, claiming he would never forgive the angel for this. He dramatically declared he'd rather become an archmage by the age of 30 than go through this again. Praying fervently, he cursed Rachel, accusing her of being a demon disguised as an angel, and demanded eternal torment for her. Finally, he muttered one last wish. If the angel insisted on making him a hero again, she should marry him first. Abelson, unimpressed, called him pathetic. Hyunseok's eyes widened in shock. Reed Run, relieved that Hyunseok was conscious, couldn't help but grab his shirt in excitement. Still dazed, Hyunseok was utterly confused. Reed Run pulled him into a tight hug, but Hyunseok immediately protested, accusing him of trying to kill him again. It was at this moment Hyunseok realized he wasn't dead. Turning around, he glanced at Abelson, piecing together the embarrassing things he had just said in front of her. Reed Run, meanwhile, asked the saintess if Hyunseok was fully healed. The saintess responded that Hyunseok was not yet fully recovered, and it should be evident to Reed Run as well that the dark mana still lingered in his body. She admitted she didn't know what might happen to him. Reed Run asked if her divine power couldn't erase the dark mana. Abelson warned that any misstep could result in Hyunseok's death. She suggested waiting, as the dark mana might dissipate over time. Apologizing sincerely, Reed Run promised to make amends by helping Hyunseok grow stronger through training. Despite being nearly suffocated by the hug, Hyunseok managed to remark that Reed Run didn't need to go to such lengths for someone as lowly as him. Reed Run dragged him away, but Hyunseok protested, asking him to wait. Meanwhile, Abelson grew curious about Hyunseok, wondering why a human was being trained by a demon. A few hours later, Hyunseok finally made it back to his room. Bobo, as usual, was there playfully chewing on Hyunseok's head. Hyunseok thanked Bobo. He recalled hearing that Bobo had destroyed his home and eaten the soldier who tried to feed him. Once again, Hyunseok thanked him, acknowledging that if it weren't for Bobo's separation anxiety, he'd still be stuck in training. Hyunseok began venting to Bobo about everything that had happened that day. It was enough to make him cry. And to top it all off, the dark mana was still coursing through him. Looking up, he asked Rachel if he was going to die. Bobo simply kept licking Hyunseok. Hyunseok called for Rachel again, but she didn't respond. Rachel was crying, devastated that her hero had been ruined and corrupted. She told him that he wasn't the same hero anymore. Hyunseok was taken aback. Shouldn't he be the one crying after everything he had just been through? Eventually, Rachel calmed down and confessed that all of the misfortunes were her fault. The dark mana in Hyunseok's body, his near-death experience, it was all on her. With biting sarcasm, she added that it was because she was a demon wearing an angel's face, a deranged maniac destined to suffer eternal torment in hell. Hyunseok froze, recognizing those were the very words he'd said to the saintess upon waking up. Realizing his mistake, he scrambled to console Rachel, even going as far as to claim there was no buff item in the world as amazing as her. Rachel, however, was unmoved and told him to shut up, saying he didn't mean any of it. Now all Hyunseok could do was wait, racking his brain for a way to make amends. 3 days later, Hyunseok felt like he was going crazy. Collapsed on the ground, he cried from the grueling training Reed Run had put him through. Abelson, who was present to heal him, tended to his injuries as usual. Hyunseok praised her beauty as he always did. Abelson, disgusted by his behavior, couldn't believe this so-called hero. Yet she healed him anyway. Hyunseok shyly scratched his head and asked Abelson for a favor before his battle the next day. He wanted her to pray for his survival and if possible to come watch him fight. The request caught Abelson off guard. The day of the battle finally arrived. a match that would decide Hyunseok's fate. The crowd buzzed with speculation. Why would anyone challenge the commander, let alone a mere human? Of course, Hemis and Reed Run were in attendance. Hemis, enjoying the atmosphere, asked Reed Run who he thought would win. Reed Run confidently replied that Hyunseok would emerge victorious. He had worked tirelessly and his talent was extraordinary. Intrigued, Hemis leaned closer and proposed a bet. If Hyunseok won, Reed Run could continue training him. Reed Run found the wager unusual and asked what would happen if Hyunseok lost. With a sly grin, Hemis revealed the catch. Reed Run would have to kill Hyunseok with his own hands. It was the responsibility he would bear for his bold words. An uneasy feeling settled over Reed Run, but he had no choice but to agree. As she looked at Hyunseok, Hemis remarked how exhilarating it had been since she felt this much excitement. The announcer began introducing the fighters. Hyunseok stood ready, his mind clear and his body in peak condition. He wasn't nervous. When his name was announced, he stepped forward with confidence. Hyunseok reflected on how much he'd grown. His stats had improved significantly, he'd gained a new skill and trait. The intense training had paid off. Reed Run's unique combat style, composed of 10 distinct forms, was now a part of Hyunseok's arsenal. Though his proficiency with it was only at 8%, he believed it would suffice. Our boy was determined to win this fight and hoped that, after the battle, he could go on a date with the silver-haired saintess. But his thoughts were quickly interrupted when Rachel shouted, demanding to know what he was thinking. On the other side, his opponent was introduced. This beast, named Kurkin, was here to punish Hyunseok for his arrogance. Both Hyunseok and Rachel immediately noticed that something was different about Kurkin. He didn't look the same as when they had seen him before. Reed Run was also caught off guard as soon as Kurkin appeared. Hemis wasted no time in reminding Reed Run that there was no backing out of their bet now. Kurkin let out a roar so loud it sent shockwaves through the area. His combat level now stood at 10,573, which Hyunseok confirmed with his goggles. Hyunseok couldn't believe it. Kurkin had surpassed 10,000 in just a few days. Rachel too was in disbelief. She suspected that Kurkin must have done something underhanded to increase his strength so rapidly. However, Hyunseok clenched his fist and muttered to himself, of course, nothing was going to be easy. As soon as the fight began, Hyunseok charged toward Kurkin. Kurkin, already anticipating the move, raised his weapon in preparation. Hyunseok knew that if that massive club landed even once, he was done for. Kurkin swung his weapon, but Hyunseok managed to avoid it. The swing was large and easy to predict. Hyunseok knew that he just had to stay calm, dodge and wait for the right opening. Hyunseok landed a solid blow, and the announcer remarked that it must have hurt even Kurkin. Hyunseok readied himself for another strike, landing it once more. The impact was tremendous, but Kurkin didn't even flinch. Hyunseok immediately realized he had messed up when he saw something blurry coming toward him. The object hit the side of his body with a powerful force. He quickly created distance between them, only to notice that his left arm had been broken by that single blow. Kurkin, however, seemed unfazed by the damage he had taken earlier. Hyunseok observed that Kurkin appeared normal, and his movements were still predictable. In his mind, Hyunseok reminded himself that he had endured worse before. He steeled himself, telling himself not to be afraid and remembering the lessons he had learned. Combat arts involved using mana with martial arts, allowing someone to smash the ground or break a rock with a single punch. Reed Run had explained this to him. He added that combat arts weren't just about raw strength. The crucial point was that combat arts are techniques meant to kill your opponent. Back during their training, Hyunseok had been told he couldn't beat Kurkin with his current abilities. The reason? He lacked the intent to kill. Without a clear intention to kill, his attacks were meaningless. As the present moment unfolded, Hyunseok recalled Reed Run's words. Kurkin was about to strike again, but this time instead of dodging, Hyunseok surged forward as if he was about to counter. This time his attack was fueled by killing intent. Hyunseok's punch landed and he shouted, "Fucking die." Unlike his previous attacks, this one pierced Kurkin's muscular body. This was the first form of Reed Run's combat style, instant obliteration. And as the name suggested, the arena was obliterated in the process. As the dust clouded the arena, Abelson wondered who had won. When the dust finally settled, Kurkin's body was revealed, a massive hole torn through his chest. "Welcome to the Donut Club, ugly ass," Hyunseok thought to himself as he raised his fist in victory. It was official, the weak human Choi Hyunseok had won. Despite his victory, Hyunseok's body trembled, and he realized that if he used Reed Run's technique again, it might just kill him. Meanwhile, Rachel was celebrating. She told Hyunseok that he had pierced straight through Korkin's heart. Hyunseok could hardly believe they had won. But then a dark red aura surrounded Korkin's body. Something wasn't right. The announcer too couldn't believe his eyes, exclaiming that it was a miracle. But Hyunseok knew this wasn't a miracle. He watched as a red object began to emerge from Korkin's body.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, it really helps. And for more content like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see another part. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you next time. Bye-bye.